Hello, everyone. Welcome to How to Read Chinese Poetry podcast. I'm Zong-qi, the program host. In this podcast program, my colleagues and I aim to introduce cutting-edge scholarship on Chinese poetry to a broad general audience. We will present 52 episodes covering the major poetic genres developed over China's long history. Each episode features close reading of one or more of the best-known Chinese poems, with an aim to illuminate their literary greatness and cultural significance. For all the discussed poems, Chinese text, English translation, romanization, and brief notes are provided at our website, howtoreadchinesepoetry.com. By following the 52 episodes, listener will gain a bird's-eye view of the thematic, formal, and generic evolution of Chinese poetry from antiquity to the modern era. Instruct and delight is what we wish to accomplish in each talk. Without further ado, let's begin. Today, Professor Kern will present the last of his 3 episodes, entitled The Lisao as a Composite Intertext. Let us welcome Professor Kern.
Welcome, everyone, to my 3rd and final podcast episode on Tian and the Lisao. Today, I will be exploring with you the nature and structure of the Lisao. Let me put my conclusion up front. I do not see the Lisao as a single poem by a single author. I see it as a collection of expressions of different kinds and different origins. My analysis is directed at 4 elements: different types of discourse, lexicon, and poetic register within the Lisao, blocks of texts that stand paratactically next to other texts, typically without transition, numerous elements of both repetition and sudden rupture within the Lisao, and the intertextuality between the Lisao and other early texts in the Zhuzi anthology. The Lisao does not have the single voice of a single author. Together with their own patterns of repetitions, the individual sections across the Lisao show very specific intertextual relations with other texts in the Zhuzi anthology that all carry their own themes, linguistic patterns, and vocabularies. These differences create jarring effects on poetic voice, perspective of speech, typology of imagery, and even gender. Just as Tian's Shiji biography is a composite of different, mutually incongruous sources, so is the Lisao. In this reading, the Lisao does not precede the poetry of the Jiuge, Jiuzhang, or Tian. The Lisao is the principal text of the Tian story, not as its first expression, but as its ultimate and ambitious sum total. Likewise, the other works are secondary not because they follow the Lisao in time, but because they are each limited to specific contents and poetic registers, which makes them each coherent and consistent in themselves. The received texts of the Lisao, Jiuge, Jiuzhang, Jiubian, and Tian are not in a linear chronological sequence. They all are informed by the different registers and lexicons of the Tian story before they became separately organized into the anthology. Together, they represent the idealized past of the ancient state of Chu, its religious practices in Jiuge, its history and mythology in Tian, and the lament of the upright but suffering official in zhang and also in bian, the 9 transformations. The latter, since Jia identified with the figure of Tian. Before its final textualization, the Tian story must have been told and retold, performed and reperformed, composed and recomposed over time in both oral and written forms. This is suggested not only by the Lisao's performative elements, repetitions, and ruptures, but also by the fact that some of its parts are impossible to understand without further context. Despite its length, the Lisao is not a self-contained text. The intertextual relationships within the Tian corpus are very complex. Consider, for example, the final 10 lines, that is before the coda at the end, of the zhang poem Ai Ying, Lamenting Ying, a text that has no overlap with the Lisao at all. However, these same 10 lines of Ai Ying also appear in the latter sections of bian, which is a text that itself shares multiple lines with the Lisao. But within bian, the Ai Ying lines are spliced apart and scattered across 4 passages. This is just one example. And in addition to dozens of such parallel lines within the early layers of the Zhuzi anthology, there also are 14 lines that are fully or partially repeated within the Lisao itself. Consider the following couplets from stanzas 47 and 87. Stanza 47. At dawn I unlocked the cartwheels by the azure parasol tree. At dusk I arrived at the hanging gardens. Stanza 87. At dawn I unlocked the cartwheels by the celestial ford. At dusk I arrived at the western extremity. The paired place names, azure parasol tree and hanging gardens, versus celestial ford and western extremity, are perfectly interchangeable. The first as metonymies and the second as abstractions denoting east and west. For the structure at dawn, at dusk, let us consider also the couplets from stanzas 4 and 17. Stanza 4. At dawn I plucked magnolias from the ridges. At dusk I pulled evergreens from the islets. Stanza 17. At dawn I drank the dew dropped from magnolias. At dusk I ate the flowers fallen from autumn chrysanthemums. Here, the generic locations of ridges versus islets denote the cosmological opposition of mountain and water, while magnolias versus evergreens or autumn chrysanthemums once again signify spring versus autumn, and therefore east versus west. All 4 stanzas create an opposition between the geographical ends of the world, yet without ever describing the journey between them. All action is frozen in place, with neither direction nor progress. Stanza 57 as well includes the at dawn, at dusk formula. It shows the same combination of cosmological oppositions and directionless action, now presumably by an elusive goddess. Stanza 57. In tumultuous profusion, now separate, now in unison, suddenly she turned obstinate and hard to sway. At dusk she took refuge at Stone's End Mountain. At dawn she washed her hair in Weiban torrent. These stanzas 4, 17, 47, and 87 could change places without any effect on the poem, and stanza 57 is part of an abrupt and obscure pursuit of a female persona. Yet in addition to the repetitions within the Lisao, the pursuit of the elusive goddess in conjunction with the at dawn, at dusk formula appears also in the poems Xiangjun and Xiangfuren in the Jiuge, as does the profusion of plant imagery. The Jiuge poems are largely consistent in their imagery and content and form as a single self-contained unit of expression. But in the Lisao, their language surfaces abruptly and then fades again, creating an overwhelming sense of discontinuity. Specific semantic elements are highly concentrated in certain parts of the Lisao, but nearly absent elsewhere. Thus, the catalogues of ancient rulers, which are reminiscent of Tian, are clustered in stanzas 37 to 41 and then 72 to 74. Mythological places appear in stanzas 47 to 49, 54, 55, 57, 59, and then 86 to 89. Plant imagery, while occasionally scattered individually, is concentrated in certain stanzas such as 3 to 4, 17 to 18, 68 to 70, 76 to 81. All these semantically distinct repetitions form identifiable textual units within the Lisao, and they do not overlap but seem mutually exclusive. Let us look at some stanzas more specifically. Please pay attention to the structure here. Plant description in the first couplet of the stanza, followed by the emotional lament in the second. Stanza 14. I hoped that the branches and leaves would grow lofty and lush, looked back and awaited my time to cut them. Even if they wilted and broke, how could this cause pain? Yet I lament how the numerous fragrances are overgrown with weeds. Stanza 17. At dawn I drank the dew dropped from magnolias. At dusk I ate the flowers fallen from autumn chrysanthemums. If only my innate effects remain truly excellent and pure, though deprived and starving for long, how could this cause pain? Stanza 21. Already cast off, I wore basil for my girdle, and further extended it to fasten angelica. With what is cherished in my heart, even in ninefold death, there will never be regret. Stanza 29. I fashioned caltrop and lotus for my garb, collected hibiscus for my skirt. Not being known, this is indeed the end, if only my innate effects remain truly fragrant. These four stanzas are identical in structure and hence freely interchangeable. There is no progress. Each time, the first two lines offer a description of plants or some directionless action dedicated to them. And in each stanza, this is then followed by a couplet that has no description at all, but is purely a statement of emotional conflict, each time introduced with either sway, even if, or go, if only. In addition, note the verbatim parallels between stanzas 14 and 17. How could this cause pain? And those between stanzas 17 and 29. If only my innate effects remain truly excellent or fragrant. If the descriptive plant imagery recalls the jiuge, the expression of emotion, dramatized by rhetorical questions, words like pain, truly, heart, innate effects, and the intense use of the first-person emotive pronoun yu, I, evokes the voice of the jiuzhang. In each stanza, the sequence is identical. The initial jiuge plant imagery gets interpreted by the jiuzhang lament. With this composite structure, no progress is seen at all from stanza 14 to stanza 29. All we have are variations on the exact same theme. Let me close with an example of intertextuality between the Lisao and other poems, found in stanzas 10 to 12 of the Lisao. Stanza 10. I rushed forward in haste, front and behind, reaching the footprints of the former kings. Iris did not probe my loyal affection, instead trusting slander and exploding in rage. Stanza 11. I surely understood how being frank and forthright would bring disaster, yet I endured it, and I could not let go. I pointed at ninefold heaven to be my witness. It was only for the cause of spirit perfected. He said, when night falls, we shall meet. Alas, he was halfway and then changed his path. Stanza 12. Earlier, he had given me trustworthy words. Later, he regretted and fled, having some other. I did not make trouble for being left and separated, yet was pained that spirit perfected so often changed. The line, probe my loyal affection, is in stanza 10, is repeated in stanza 35, but also in the jiuzhang poem Xi Song, where it is paired with another parallel from Lisao, stanza 24. The phrase, I pointed at ninefold heaven to be my witness, in stanza 11, repeats in Xi Song as, I pointed at azure heaven to be my witness. And then lines 5 and 6 of stanza 11 present a problem. Quote, he said, when night falls, we shall meet. Alas, he was halfway and then changed his path, unquote. Now, these lines uniquely add to the 4-line stanza structure of the Lisao, but they have no commentary by Wang Yi. Compare the following passage from the jiuzhang poem Chou Si. In the past, the Lord had given me trustworthy words. He said, when night falls, we shall meet. Alas, he was halfway and then turned sideward. Instead, he now had his other intent. Obviously, we are reading two versions of the same passage, even with some minor changes and with the lines being in different order. Nothing makes us privilege the version of the Lisao as the primary text. If anything, we should doubt the original presence of the two additional lines here. Instead of engaging in futile efforts to determine a hierarchy of original and copy between these passages, let us instead acknowledge how easily lines from Lisao and jiuzhang could converge and switch places, and may well have done so from the very beginning, when both were drawing on the same shared repertoire of the Tian story. In this story, the Lisao is not a single discrete text, but the combination and repetition of multiple sources. And with this, I shall end this final episode of my podcast. Thank you for listening.
Let us thank Professor Kern for such a stimulating talk. This talk concludes his topic, Qi Yuan and the Lisao, the poem and its author as a composite text. To learn more from Professor Kern on this topic, you may read his paper entitled Cultural Memory and the Epic in Early Chinese Literature, The Case of Qi Yuan and the Lisao. The paper will appear in the 2022 spring issue of the Journal of Chinese Literature and Culture. Next week, we'll get started on the topic, the Han Music Bureau Poetry. Professor Ruilong Su of the National University of Singapore will be our guest host.